Good morning. Welcome to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everyone. How goes it? Back at it for another session.
Back at it on a Tuesday, correct?
Is it? I don't know. Is it, Seth?
We don't know because this is a pre-recorded episode. Sorry again.
You should know by the number.
Oh, yeah, it's true. The numbers tell you.
Except what
we do one a week or 2 a week, and then it kind of iterates between Tuesday, Thursdays. So which number is it, Tommy? Evens or odds are on Tuesdays?
I'm not going to say anything. This is on Seth now.
I wash my hands of this issue.
Oh, unbelievably cruel. I think it's Tuesday.
All right, we'll go with it. Any
Happy Tuesday.
There we go.
And if it's Thursday, well, you
get a bonus.
It is what it is. If you can't tell by now, we're pre-recording.
This is a pre-recorded show. So we'll jump in and we'll go do a couple intros here. Some things that we found that were interesting across the interwebs. Seth, you found some cool stuff. Want to give us a kind of a clue in on what you're finding?
Yeah, in our previous episode, I kind of alluded to the fact that there was a cool sort of implementation of how to quickly diagram measures.
Yeah.
Tommy found the article that precipitated this conversation that was brought to my attention. Uh-huh. So this comes from Data Goblins. And I've never heard of this one before, but it's a fantastic blog site.
Yeah.
Done by Kurt Bueller. A little bit hard to find because it's not connected into many different places, but check out the content over there. But he does one on visualizing measured dependencies and using essentially a new tool I'd never heard of before called Mermaid with Tabular Editor. So
Mermaid, right?
What this is, it's a diagram and visualization charting tool, essentially UML tool, right? So shows dependencies between things. And what he outlines in here is a C# script that you can use within Tabular Editor to create the relationships or show the measure GUID relationships between like parent-child of each one of the measures. So it's literally taking the code that he has generated, popping it into Tabular Editor, running it against your model. It dumps out all of your measures and whether or not they're used in other measures. Mm-hmm. And you can take the output of that, copy paste into Mermaid, and just bam. Yeah. You instantly get a visual breakdown or a Sankey flowchart of like all of the dependencies of your measures. It's amazing.
Nice.
From a visual standpoint.
Yeah.
And you can dump it out into many different formats. So if you're thinking about documentation, like we've avoided this like the plague, right? Like this is the lowest level grain. You're not going to touch this. You're not going to keep it updated because you rip through a model and you'd have to go spend another 20 minutes updating documentation every time.
Yeah.
Well, in this instance, like this literally could be part of your deployment, right? Like just, okay, copy, paste, boom, update the visual, done. And
totally.
Also, like, I guess the way one of my guys was working on this was trying to find whether or not he could delete a measure, right? Which is always a huge question.
Yeah.
Can you delete something, or does it have dependencies in something else? Then this clearly outlines for you that really quickly from a visual standpoint that you can or can't because it's used in other places. Or fix the downstream measures if you do want to get rid of it, right?
Yeah.
So super cool article, great solution to that problem.
So when you look through the article, and we'll put the link of this one in the chat window as well, he has a Tabular Editor script that he's using to kind of just going through and helping you list out the lineage of things and help you produce that Mermaid schema, which is the neat part here is the schema is all just JSON. It's just easy. It just outputs code that, you can then, well, if it's drawing a diagram based on code, great. Just figure out how to make the diagram using another tool, which is now Tabular Editor, and being able to use this script to produce that, which is really cool. One of the major things I think, this is not any slight on this article, but like this is really good for the model. The thing that I'm missing still is where's the visual layer? Where do I look at? So I'm still like, this is exactly what I want. This is super good, but I need another layer of where's the visuals? Where's the visual inside this architecture? I need to know not only where all the measures are used, but on every page of every report. This is what MKey's tool does in I think it's Power BI Cleaner tool or something like that. I think it's what she has on her website. But you can grab the raw visual or PBI, or thin report, the thin report or an actual report, and you can look at all the things, the assets in it, and it gives you a better picture of here's all the measures that are used and all the visuals. So now someone's got to just take PBI tools and all the pieces are here. They have now I've got Data Goblins with his script to go get all the measures. You've got PBA tools that rips apart the entire file itself, and it builds all where the measures are referenced. And then you've got like Umkey's tool that does the other piece of this, which is take everything in the visual layer and link it back to real visuals. So we're so close to someone putting all the pieces together and having the full proper lineage tool, which I don't know why they don't have this already for, I want to call it Dataverse, but that's not the right tool. The data governance tool, it's Purview. I don't know why Purview just doesn't do this already. Do it in Purview, and I think people would start using Purview more.
Take my money.
Yeah, exactly right. Let me point out a model and a thin report and tell me exactly where all the things are used and what stuff can be removed. That is the scariest part in any model design, is deleting stuff because you don't know what it's going to break. Hilarious. Let's go in. Excellent. Tommy, you got some other intro stuff here.
Yeah, so I know we talked about the release wave, the new one a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. That being said, I was kind of going through it with that new portal that everyone's talking about. I'm like, all right. And I noticed some really kind of a few that jumped out to me that I am really looking forward to, that not a lot of people, I haven't seen a lot of chatter about. So one is they're completely revamping data flows. Like the whole feature set, they're replacing data flows, so to speak. But one of the things that we've talked about a bunch on this podcast is data flows are great, but the thing is they only live in a sense in Power BI. It's very frustrating to try to do anything where we want to actually push it somewhere. So there's actually a few that are coming out later this year where there's actually going to be, this one's really not a lot of information, but data flow actions. So basically what it says on the portal itself is basically like perform ETL actions on top of your data flows after they result out. But the other parts of this as well is you're going to be able to actually load data from a data flow into, not load from, but into Azure Storage, Data Lake, SharePoint, SQL, and CSV. So I'm really, really intrigued to see how that's going to work, where the data flow is going to push to the source rather than the other way around. This is to
me, this right here, this moment, this is we were on a phone call at the user group meeting like a week ago or so, and we were talking about, hey, does SSIS still live? Like, is SSIS still a thing? And we were saying, it's still going to be a thing. But we had a more experienced individual on the phone and said, well, I used to write COBOL, and then COBOL kind of turned into SQL, and because it was an easier language to understand, it just became more popular at the time. And the gentle fade to another language has kind of disappeared. And I said, I think that's what I'm seeing right now with SSIS packages. You're going to be using them less and less. Other tools will become more and more capable. It'll be easier and easier for you to use other solutions that are more enjoyable to work with. So I think this is going to go the way of Cobalt. At some point, SSIS is going to disappear. It's going to weed its way out, and you're no longer going to need a DBA for those.
When is the last time you had to look at an SSIS package?
I had a project, like probably in the last 6 months, where I had to go take out SSIS packages and figure out what we were doing and turn them into API calls and storing things in a data lake. So
it's such a clunky experience.
It's so bad.
That we have now.
It's so bad. And the code management and then just how to get it to run and the data connection side of it is just a pain. It's just so hard to work with.
How do you, so data flows with write back or writing or inserting into databases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which I think
that's interesting.
That's kind of cool, right? I mean, to me, this feels like Microsoft's really putting the eggs in this basket. Like, we're building something that is going to be easily to move data around between different things. Just as long as my stinking data flow can read a delta table, a delta lake.
I mean, it's an interesting segue into the conversation today.
Yes, it is. It is.
But secondarily, I think super powerful, even from the standpoint of what we were talking about with how do you like the major rebuild of a report?
Yes.
Right. Because one of the biggest problems is if you have a bunch of data in Excel, getting a business user the ability to write into a table, right, or into a back end system that you need them to.
Yep.
And that could potentially be an avenue for them to
I absolutely
keep
love
things
it.
updated in a source system that is much more reliable and stable for large scale Power BI reporting.
And why do we need people doing that, right? What is the importance of having other people be able to build a Power Query flow that sends you data?
Mm-hmm.
The importance of this is you can offload responsibility to other teams of people for various portions of data. I mean, this has been my gripe with this whole data engineering realm is I don't control the data. I'm given a data source and say, connect to this and load it into these visuals on the other end or whatever, but I don't control the data coming out of the original system. So I'm doing a ton of cleaning and figuring things out. So I don't have any capability or power to move or clean data from these other sources. So why not give that onus back to that team who's making the data? I like it a lot. I think it's a great idea.
Interesting. Cool. Well, we'll see what happens with it.
Excellent. Yeah, it should be cool. I'm looking forward to the load Azure SQL database with data flows. That'd be if I can pick up. That was one of my big challenges with anything around Databricks. Databricks does not work well with going out of lake tables into SQL tables. Just does not happy. If I could do that in another process, I'm more happy to do that somewhere else. Anyways, awesome. Only other opener we have today, I think, there's two conferences coming up. There is one in Chicago and there's one down in Orlando. So the Chicago one is the Data Insight Summit, and it is happening September 12th through the 14th. Use our promo code. We're going to all be there, Tommy, Seth, and myself. Use promo code 22 to get $100 off a checkout at the Data Insight Summit. And then if you want to go,
you recognizing that I'm repping today, man?
Yeah, you've got the brand.
The old school speaker shirt from the Data Insight Summit there. Going through a little move here.
Yep,
Also, now
exactly.
like unpacking clothes. I'm like, oh my goodness,
where was that shirt?
That's
awesome. And then the other event that is coming up is the Microsoft Power Platform Conference in Orlando, Florida. It's happening on September 20th and 22nd. And the promo code for that event will be down in the description of the event. And you can see that there. And if you can get another $50 off your event there, if you'd like, so you can really load yourself up with Power BI and Power Platform knowledge at these two conferences. All right. With that, let's roll into our topic today. So our good transition from SSIS, new data engineering, and what does that look like? Our topic today is, do you need a DBA, a database administrator? And I think this will be an interesting conversation. I feel like the roles of this person have greatly changed, or what we expect them to know has greatly changed. So I think there may be different expectations when we say this word now, and I'd be curious to see where the conversation goes around this one. So
I'm very curious to see where this conversation is going to go, because one of us has had quite a bit of experience in the DBA / database world. So
name rhymes with Beth, starts with S.
So it'll be interesting to see where we're going to go with the conversation.
Well, so that just means that means that person can carry a lot of weight in what they say because they've had a lot of experience working on and working with DBA-like activities. And you've got two greenbacks here.
True enough.
That are
looking for the opinions of two guys.
They're clearly in the opinion range.
So what specifically are we gearing towards if we're saying, do you need a DBA?
Well, I didn't really have a specific on there, but I think there's actually this concept of, do you even need one? I think that's cool. This could go a number of different ways. But do you even need to hire a DBA today in this new world of a lot of cloud, a lot of things that you're moving around data now? The tooling that you can use now is much more business facing than I think ever before that I've seen. It's much more accessible, easier to use, a lot less code you're writing. And I know for DBAs, Seth, you would study. You took isn't there like a SQL course or something like Microsoft certifications?
Sure. In the same way that there are certifications for Power BI, there's
data flows
been around for
data
a long
analyst
time.
Yeah,
lots of materials and certifications you can go through for Microsoft on that.
So I guess I'm not. But, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say a lot of it was related to maintaining and ensuring that the platforms that were running worked at peak performance.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess we should go through and maybe define our definitions, because maybe our definition of a SQL DBA is now maybe different between the three of us. So maybe we should define that first. Maybe Tommy, give us your definition of what a SQL DBA or what is a DBA data. I guess let's not qualify with SQL DBA. Let's just call it a DBA, database administrator. Okay. What does that look like to you, Tommy?
Oh, how this has changed over the years. I'm going to do the classical sense of the word, just because I think that's part of the conversation today. But when I started, the DBA was one in charge of the databases. Like they were your access. They were the guard before you could cross the bridge with anything going on. They were also the person who would gently notify you if you were doing some intense loads on the database.
Okay.
Or why is this table and I have your account, please do not do this query anymore.
Yep.
And they were responsible from the ETL to what data sources were coming in, but especially the load time and making sure everything was up and running.
Okay.
So for me, the DBA is kind of like the IT of database.
Okay. And then, Seth, what would you say? How would you kind of walk into your definition there?
What is your definition?
Ah, crap. All right. So I think the role of this person has changed. If we're talking about database administrators, I would rather talk about what are all the different databases that are needing managing at this point in time, and what was it previously, right? I think previously in an episode of DBA, in the previous space of this, it was all around. I have a SQL server, it's on-prem, or I have a server. It's a piece of hardware we've purchased. It lives in an environment where we have an IT group that owns it. Someone has made the business case to use it, and someone is developing on it to bring data to a central place. This might have been your enterprise data warehouse. This might have been something for a business unit where they're just grabbing data for just their business unit. But it's a piece of hardware. You're managing the infrastructure. You're getting it set up. You're configuring it. You're securing it. You're looking at the performance of it. You're building processes to take data and mature the data. It becomes a bit of a black box to those things. And then to Tommy's point, I definitely think I saw the database administrator be that person that would listen to the business to some degree and either provide some access and do some basic reporting out of that database thing, write some SQL queries, produce some tables, and maybe even go as far as this is the person that's building or integrating other systems into that data warehouse. I'm thinking here like business objects. We have a bunch of data. There's a data warehouse being populated from our enterprise operational system. This is that person who's saying, okay, let me build you some cubes. Let me build you some universes around that information that then you can then go access and go get data out of it. So the surface area of that person was basically all the way through to modeling. They're doing some data modeling, and then there's other tooling that sits in front of that they may use to go access that information. So most of what I think that person was doing was infrastructure and performance tuning of the database to make sure that it is sized properly and running efficiently. That's where I think the role traditionally has been. I think now these roles are substantially changing because how you do databasing is much different, and what is performant and what you're spending your money on is in a different place now. And the cloud, in my opinion, has changed fundamentally a lot of what those people are expected to do. So I'll give you a lens of like what I think it is now. Tommy, you got a call. Turn off your phone.
I got a call. I thought it was on mute. That's right. I have an automated focus mode on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but it's
not on today. So where things are sitting now, I think now the cost. I think now the DBA role has moved into a cost standpoint because everything's moved into a role where you pay as you go. The DBA is now an individual who has to understand where does the data come from, all its sources, very comfortable with cloud data sources of information, and then pulling that data into a central location, and then managing in that central location, being able to manage the cost on how much it costs you to run those data pipelines. Their skill set used to be a bunch of SQL and SSIS packages. It's moved to Azure Data Factory. It's now moved to Synapse. It's now moved to Azure, and it's now like Delta Lakes. That to me, those are the things that this person must know now to handle some of that role. And I think you'd even would change the name of this role. It is no longer a DBA. Now it's a data engineer or data analyst. Maybe somewhere, maybe some people would blend those terms together in a little bit different way. That's how I see it. Seth, what do you think?
I like that the conversation is old to new, because like many parts of the industry, you've had to adapt quickly as tooling has kind of made light year leaps pretty consistently. So it depends on in the realm of a DBA, you could have a lot of data engineering, BI reporting tasks along with, or just a straight up DBA role in the past, because depending on how large your infrastructure was, the three main things are essentially you're overall responsible for the instance and server performance, right? Of the operational peak proficiency of the SQL servers, right? So within that is obviously maintenance, maintaining, making sure you're on the right versions of things, deployments or upgrading were quite big ordeals. And ultimately, the main tenet of the role was reliability, right? So backup, and restore, right? Like moving databases around, ensuring data is there, ensuring that if something goes wrong on a disk, right, like you can recover. Right, so you're moving from one piece of hardware to another piece of hardware.
When that data's gone, that data's gone. In this case,
right, So you had to build your own redundancy in many cases. Until the tool set's kind of caught up, and you could do read-only availability groups or availability groups, and have data in multiple places. Depending on how the roles branch, though, right, we start talking about some of the data engineering related things, kind of, but it's still very technical, right? Because the role had to maintain multiple environments, right? That's QA, UAT, prod. So you're refreshing data, you're deploying code bases, from one environment to another. Security, right? Huge thing. Roles, who has access, like locking things down to make sure that nobody can gain access to your SQL servers. And then you get into where I think we can talk more about how the role has changed, or what potentially you would not, like you would transform into a different platform, which would relate to like data manipulation. Right? Building stored procedures, views, moving data around within a database, jobs. And then ultimately you're responsible for the quality and consistency of data within the database, right? Ensuring that there's nothing that can happen within there that doesn't make sense or can't be tied back, because you're responsible for building the relationships between these tables. And then a key part of performance, which I think will be interesting to talk about more, is indexing, right? Indexing the tables appropriately so that the speed by which you can access and write data is balanced, as opposed to just dropping giant blobs into a storage place. So lot can be done within there. And then in my past, like obviously a lot of reporting, depending on how heavy your application engages with SQL.
This is where
we were building a lot of stored procedures and things that the database would access all the time. And
that's one. I don't think I put that in there, but stored procedures is another good one there. But you said, I mean, was the role of the DBA in your mind, Seth, also inclusive of all the SSRS reporting? Was that like their role?
And that's where it depends on the size of the company, I think. Right? In some, absolutely not. In others, it's kind of the DBA was kind of the catch-all role of being the database person. Right? That had access to, and maybe it was a branch off of, that being a business intelligence, individual or data engineer. But in our realm, way back in the day, it was an all-encompassing title where a lot of my forays were started in the reporting front end, because you could do less damage there. Right? Like
it's more like a read-only
business,
or read-only role there in that stuff. Interesting. All right. So, how does so this is where I think I want to take this conversation, and you guys, feel free to shape this a little bit, so if you want as well. But I'm feeling like, okay, we've got a good definition. It sounds to me like there's this broader trend of the infrastructure, while it is still important and you still need to understand how it works, I'm doing a lot less management in the infrastructure space as a DBA now versus before. Would you guys agree with that statement, or is that something, would you change that? Tommy?
See, this is the interesting thing, because I think the article is great because they really do say like there's still this huge human component. We've talked about AI and what it's going to do, but I think the biggest change for the DBA and what they used in the past is the addition of more and more, not just data, but data sources, but also what Microsoft's providing for call it the business user, where look what I can do with the data flow. Like I said, they're trying to build this the Azure Azure data factory with the computed entities and linked entities and data flows. Like that a user can literally just, in a sense, say, you know what, I don't need to actually talk to DBA. We can set up a few workspaces. There are linked entities that runs quickly, and we're good to go. Or you can do a data mart and really solve a lot of this. So there's a lot of options for someone who's in Power BI to not necessarily depend on the DBA for everything. So
I don't think you answered my question, though. Tommy, listen to my question. Okay. Do you think the role has shifted from infrastructure management to something else? Is the infrastructure as much of a role anymore? I don't think you said the word infrastructure at all. Are you talking like how are you linking that comment to like infrastructure pieces? I don't understand.
So, I mean, from the infrastructure, I think it absolutely is changing where they're not going to be managing every single data source like they were in the past.
Well, I'm talking like the hardware. Like I don't need to go like if I'm using data flows or data mart, there's no SQL server I have to go procure. It's already ready to go, right? And this is one of the advantages I think of cloud in this space is I don't need to go procure equipment anymore. And if I do, it's a couple clicks and a SQL database turns on. So I think the whole, yes, there's definitely, I think a little bit of a role here of like a security review on things, right? Making sure you have like virtual networks in Azure and the company's comfortable with what the security features you're putting in place are on top of the Azure piece. But once you get to Azure, you're relying on Microsoft is taking that load away from you, and other databases such as like SQL serverless, right? I'm not worrying about anything. It just connects to stuff. It just comes with turning on Synapse or like Cosmos DB, right? An operational database that is for your enterprise web application, whatever that may be. A lot of the other infrastructure pieces, I don't worry about anymore. If I need co-location of data, I just turn on a button and boom, data gets replicated across regions. Wonderful. I feel like that in the backing up stuff that you were talking about earlier, Seth, that's like a tick box now, right? The amount of time you spent working on like, hey, I got to schedule the backup. Make sure the machine didn't run out of memory. Make sure the machine doesn't run out of hard drive space. Like, all the logs, where are they going? And then now it's just check, done.
And the thing is, though, is like, right, for a non-platform as a service SQL server, right?
True, yes.
You can still have things in the cloud that you need to manage to some degree.
But I really don't like it, though. I just went through a security review with one of my clients. I
understand why you don't like it.
I know. Well, I just went through a very strong security review with a client recently, and the security team coming in to review every time a VM showed up, just riddled with what's your schedule, how are you going to update it, what are all these things, like what's the VNet that's going to it, like what can touch that server, who can log into it, who can't. I'm like, I just don't want to mess with it. Anytime you stand up like a SQL server as a service, or if you can, again, there's probably examples where you don't need to have that, but if you can design your architecture away from physical hardware like VMs and such, dude, there's like a million less things you need to worry about from a security surface area of what's going on there. You're lifting that burden onto Microsoft, and there's a lot of peace of mind that goes along with that, and they're likely adhering to more modern standards than you would to go into that SQL Server box, make sure the software is up to date, because that thing doesn't auto update. It just boggles my mind that people even want to still put VMs in place or virtualize entire machines, because it's just so wasteful.
Yeah, but your lens of viewing that is purely in reporting, right? Or Power BI, right? Because like I'm leery. I'm really leery myself to step into the full cloud architecture space, because like my experience just isn't in. Why would I choose PaaS over SaaS in certain cases? Because there absolutely are use cases where PaaS is going to be more performant, or you want to do something because it makes more sense because you're engaging with an application, and Power BI or reporting is a byproduct of something that needs to interact with that, right? Like I'm not going to go so blatant as to say like SaaS everything, but I do agree from the standpoint that the more you go towards the services-based solutions, the infrastructure and what you need to manage is significantly less. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think to me, what this affords me is it affords me less headache around worrying about a lot of other things, and I can focus on, or I can hone my time in, okay, what is the story of the data? What do I need to do to transform the data in a way that is more efficient to consume? So I feel like I'm spending a lot more time, or am able to spend more time on that, and a lot less time making sure that data getting access to data. And this is, to me, this is also the great equalizer here. Again, I'm talking DBAs, but how does this role of managing data, transforming data fit with the business user now? Because I mean, this is going to be a bad analogy. It's just going to throw a fit here. I can see it already. I can already see him getting angry. I mean, to some degree, there's a role of the DBA that is transforming data from what it was to what it needs to be to get it ready for reporting. That's a bit of a role. Traditionally, that was all done in their domain on their on-prem machines. Now we have Power BI with Power Query, and now we have a lot of these online tools that are coming with data flows, all this other stuff. We're now moving that entire role away from the DBA. It could be, Tommy, I think would agree with me on this one. Come on, Tommy, get on my side here. The DBA doesn't need a data engineer as much anymore, or there are people that can self-serve more of their own data transformations. The tooling has been built with PowerBI.com, where you can do a lot more transformations locally or on their platform versus needing to call in a DBA to do all the transformations for you.
I'm completely with you. And that's the conversation we also had.
This is a rare occurrence here, everyone. I know, right? Tommy agrees with me.
You're just trying to marshal support before I talk.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is the same conversation. We had the same conversation, right, when we talked about like the older architecture of Microsoft, where now it's all available in Power BI, but before you had SSIS and Visual Studio.
Yep.
And just the leaps and bounds.
And access databases and Excel. Like you had to use all these tools to kind of like get access to the data, shape it a little bit, and then use it.
Yeah, I really actually can't believe I'm agreeing with you, because this goes against everything that I hold dear. But I mean, because it's the idea, right? Because now everyone's going to run rampant with their own data sets and data flows and data models because they don't need to worry about the DBA. But there's so much more benefit to this because, again, we're dealing with so many more sources of data. And again, like the conversation we had, sometimes it's going to be Excel and we may not want it to be, but that's what the business is. Dataverse,
correct.
Dynamics, things are constantly changing. So in order to have, who better to have someone to manage that than the business user? Now, all of that being said, and then I'll let Seth go. All of that being said, they're without any process, because anyone can create a data flow, anyone create a data mart.
Yes.
There is that role, especially when you're trying to really get master data, right?
Yes.
These people don't know, like, oh, we need a primary key, and it can't, what's the best way to do a primary key? Why don't I just merge these 4 text columns together? And that's a unique value. Great.
Well, the data source system will not obey best practices, right? You go into Dataverse or Dynamics, you're going to have GUIDs all over the place. Power BI does not love GUIDs. So what do you like, star schemas, very good when you're talking about Power BI data sets. Not everyone understands them. People still think you can build an enterprise data warehouse in Power BI and get reasonable data out of it. Yeah, maybe you can to a point, but at some point it gets too confusing. The fundamentals haven't changed. It's just the tooling has, and the availability of people to be able to make their own messes, I guess, has. What do you think, Seth?
How do you feel when someone says, I know Power BI, and they don't know anything about the infrastructure?
I'd hire them on the spot.
How do you feel when I say anyone can build a model, so they're all the same?
I don't think that's what I'm saying, though. I'm saying the tooling enables this. The fundamentals are still there. Everyone can build a model.
What you guys are talking about is data movement and transformation, and putting things into a position where we can report on things, right? And 100%, I agree. The tool sets are there.
Yes.
They're easier to access. They're easier to use, and plop data in places.
Sure.
Right.
And that's, but that's one of the roles of the DBA, not all of the role of the DBA.
I would say that that's mainly been the data integration engineer, an integration engineer, right?
Okay.
Like movement of data in plain in SSIS spaces has primarily not been the DBA role.
Okay. Maybe I misled on what I thought a DBA was doing.
What I would say, well, I mean, it's the jack of all trades. Was I doing it? Of course, small company, right?
Sure.
The DBA tech guy, we were the ones that knew how to deal with the tool sets.
Yes.
But I guess the way I would phrase this is I am very cognizant that I am a BI guy in a world of tools that I don't have depth in, right? So one of the things let's talk SQL for a second, right? So you can go serverless, you can go to PaaS, you can have data access, we can do right now potentially data flows, like dump a bunch of data into systems. In the same way that we talk about model performance, the do's and don'ts, there is still a a level of expertise and knowledge that individuals, call them a DBA, right? Call them performance, engagement engineers or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, sure.
Is when you open the floodgates on a Power BI data refresh, like you need somebody to go, oh guys, do you realize what you're doing to our server when you like that bull knocks into the china shop? Like, let me help you out. And one, show you that it's not a good idea to dump millions of rows into a table without any indexing, that you're just randomly joining tables together with no keys between them, that there's no data consistency in the storage that you're dumping all of this data into. So you can't rely on it for any of your reporting because there's no dependencies between them.
Sure.
And how you're doing things is very broad strokes, right? And you can paint yourself into a pretty bad position when you don't have somebody who can performance tune, look at like the structures that we all would be 100% aghast at if we saw in a model, right? Bidirectional relationships and stuff everywhere and tables just hanging out and making no sense. Like there's a lot to it in understanding like how a query runs on a server, right?
Sure.
Even if it is in serverless, like, and I agree 100%, like not having to stand up infrastructure, not having to keep on versions, not breaking code changes, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But from a performance standpoint, I think this is where the conversation is still very strong for this type of role, where just keeping people like me in line with what I'm trying to create. Like these are the people I collaborate with when I'm like, I'm about to dump a table that's going to, get 1 million rows a day.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And us doing that. And then a month later, somebody knocking on the door going, guys, do you think an index would be good? Because all of our reporting is taking hours to run now. Right. Like blowing, like pulling citizen, data folks into that realm, I think isn't valid in this case. Right. I think the role is still very strong, even in other platforms. The only difference is how has this role grown? To your point that you made before.
Yeah.
Databricks is a system. Other systems for database storage.
Spark
is like in the
sure. Let's generalize it like a little bit. Like Spark is the next thing. There's a shift happening, and you have to play with that.
The shift for the DBA or performance person, right? For them is, I need to understand the infrastructures of Spark and the distributed computing, as opposed to what was bound or what bound me in SQL. That's their leap. And I agree with you from the standpoint that should that individual or the person who's making my things run fast have to learn or pivot into there?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Because they're the checks and balances person that's like still going to continually push guys like me to say, you're doing something really dumb here. Right. And I'm going to show you how not to do that dumb. Or I'm going to tweak this and make it, much more performant for you. And me going, oh man, awesome. Because I got the data shaped the way I want it to.
Yes.
It's doing what I need it to do. But I think it's a disservice to think that just because we can do it means that we're doing it the right way. And I think that's the danger sometimes with all of these tools at our disposal without diving into the grain of them is there's a way to do it. You can make it work, but you're not making it work at peak proficiency, which means you're likely either costing yourself more money because of, especially in Databricks or, cluster usage and things like that.
That's what I think
versus being really performant. And that's in general also been one of the biggest tenets for DBAs or people who had their mind on performance is keeping costs low. Right. So I think the shift goes from, okay, you were forced to have to do performance testing, tuning, whatever, because there was no room to scale.
Correct.
Like you had the hardware. That's all you had.
The next spend
Otherwise,
is a lot of money.
Had to buy more hardware.
Exactly.
Whereas now that's easier.
It's a lot more pay to go.
Auto scales, or it's like, oh, well, things aren't performant. Like just pay more money.
Yeah, exactly right. Again, this also comes into like business requirements, right? Does the business say get it done right away, or do you want me to tune it? Or this is another area where you could add a lot of tech debt, into this space that you have to manage your way through, right? You're going to make these changes. You're going to do this, just get it done. Okay, it's done. You're going to have to come back and revisit it again because you need to make it more cost effective. And then the conversation becomes, oh, hey, Mr. Data Team, great. I'm glad that we're making our data work. Expenses are really high this month. Like, is this like? Then the finance guy comes after you and says, do we really require to be spending $5,000 a month in just data transformations? Is that really required for what we're doing? You're like, well, I could start looking at some tuning things. And so then you come to tune, and then can we turn off any clusters? Can I run jobs faster? Where's the wastefulness in what we're doing so that we can make things less expensive?
I think one of those areas, even for folks that may not have the performance guy, right?
Yeah.
DBAs were and are key resources in making things run really fast. Is a simple way for the business intelligence folks or Power BI folks is just keep an eye on your refreshes.
Mm-hmm.
If you're pumping around a lot of data, and you know that, especially in a model, keep it like all of a sudden over time.
Just look at
your refreshes continually
taking
growing?
longer and longer and longer.
Right.
If you got refreshes that are taking an hour to hour and a half, right? You have a limit of 2 hours for a refresh. Here, plain and simple. It will fail and turn itself off. So there's not. And actually, the other day I was in the Microsoft portal, and I was looking at the refresh history of a particular pipeline. I think they should change that screen. I think they should add to that screen a little bar chart or a little line chart that shows every refresh and how long it took that refresh to occur.
Show me my last 30 days or something.
Something like that. Because they're already collecting the data in log form. There's already little logs there.
Yeah.
Show me a little timeline.
Consistent, or am I just kind of creeping the whole time?
And a lot of times too. No, but a lot of times too.
Spark line.
A little spark line. And then what it should show you is the average refresh time. So it should give you a median and an average refresh time on that data point. So that way, when I go to that page, I click on what is the refresh history on that data set doing. I know, like, even when I'm developing things, I'm trying to hit refresh on that data set anyways to just get some data in it. I have no metrics on how long it's going to take for it to do things.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to that page and I'm reading each line individually and trying to do the math. Okay, that was about 5 minutes. Okay, that's about 18. Okay, that's about 20. Okay, there's another 5. Okay. And so I'm going through, and I know now that
when I refresh times.
Well, of course I do, because I'm using incremental refresh on everything now. Like, I incremental refresh as much as I can. So I'm only loading a day of data. I may have billions of records in tables, but I'm only looking at like 2 days, 3 days max to refresh. And that's why it's fast, because it should be taking that, in cloud. And this is this is another mantra that I hold to. When you're in cloud, the storage is cheap, the compute is expensive. So everything you do, everything in your mindset has shifted from what you've done in the past with SQL. SQL traditionally, or SQL DBAs traditionally, we're focused on, I'm running out of space. I don't have enough space. So we have to aggregate and roll up, and we don't keep all the individual transactions anymore. We just aggregate them. And
or cut it off into,
you don't need 10 years
drive somewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. You don't need 10 years of data. We'll come back and get it
in some physical form.
So you're really severely limiting the amount of information that you're trying to leverage there. Now, the advent of data lake, again, storage is cheap. Sure, keep 30 years of data, keep all the information, keep every transaction change in a table. Not a problem. Now you're focusing on, okay, how do I optimize the amount of data I need to touch to update my records so that they're current? And that, I think, is the new challenge now, because I'm trying to minimize how much data I need to touch or move or transform or update. That becomes your new bar on performance now. So to me, I'm looking at this, I'm hearing you talk, Seth, and I'm thinking about two people. There's the one who was a DBA previously and is now moving into this new realm. There's a new learning path, I think, there. There's things that they're trying to put in their tool belt that will enable them to be a good DBA moving forward. On the other hand, I'm thinking, well, those guys are retiring to some degree. There's also another new wave of people coming into this for the first time, studying up, becoming the data engineer, becoming the data analyst, or whatever the certification Microsoft's giving you now in cloud. I think, to me, I'm like, what do I tell those new people? What should you be learning? Where do you spend your time? Where's the value add? And I was listening to some statistics in our Power BI user group. 60 to 80%, I think they were saying something like that, something really high. It was like they expect to be, more of their data expects to be in the cloud by the next 5 years or something like that. So like it's not just a little shift, it's a major shift happening where many companies are considering deprecating their on-prem hardware. And I have a couple clients doing the same thing. Hey, we have SQL servers. They're 15 years old. We don't want to use them anymore. What do we do now? What's the new world for this look like for us? Great. I'll come in when we build a cloud data platform for you. Like that's what my company does. So like,
I mean, even 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? Like the conversation was like,
way different.
Get into the cloud.
Get in the cloud.
Now I think it's you get the second wave of folks, of companies behind it, where once you need to start deprecating things, and realizing that your competitors are now light years ahead of you, go put your data there, right? Like, it's okay. And from a security standpoint, all the folks that were freaking out,
this reminds me of
that, there are very stable, secure platforms that I don't have to manage, and actually they're probably more secure than whatever I can manage on my own.
And that's my point. This reminds me of the infographic, the trough of disillusionment. Have you seen that? So there's like it's this like rubber band effect. It's like this it goes, your expectations are very high when you go to this new technology stack. It just ramps up, and then you hit the peak of
early adopters.
Yeah, you hit the peak of inflated expectations, and then you're going through this trough of disillusion. Like, oh, the cloud's going to solve everything. Okay, great, yay! And I think we're coming out of that trough of disillusionment. That the cloud doesn't, like, to me, people are like, oh, I'll just throw it in a lake.
This is where, like, if a service is if a company is coming in and saying, like, hey, our platform and everything we do doesn't require any performance tuning at all, right? You don't need a DBA.
Yeah. Bull crap.
Right. But in the same way, like some things are helpful, and Azure does this, right? Like, when you stand up a SQL server, there are recommended indexes all the time.
Yeah.
But not all of them are good for your business use case.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And the other thing, to the bane of my existence, like, and maybe this is just where I grew up in DBA land, like, you have naming conventions that make sense. Like, dude, these auto-generated indexes, IX_15655, like, what the hell is that? Like, dude, if you know what the table is, like, use the columns that you want in the index as the name and an underscore. Like, come on, Microsoft, really? Like,
yes. Well, and therein lies the problem, right? Where there are these amazing tools, but that being said, we don't know what these self-service tools, in a sense, the true capacity is, right? Like, it's a little difficult to sometimes see the full, so to speak, like the load that it's going to do. The more data, to Mike's point that you always are preaching, we're going to have more data in the next 2 years than we've ever created.
Oh, totally. It's just growing. It's just growing faster. So your tools have to get better, is what this it tells me. Yeah, totally.
1,000%.
And also, it means that if you think about it, if the data volume your team and your company needs to absorb is going to double and triple year over year for the next couple of years, like, if it's going to exponentially grow like that, if you're expecting to handle all that data with a team of the same number of people, you're disillusioned. Like,
1,000%.
You're not going to be able to handle the volumes of data you want to be able to get into. So the two things are going to happen. You keep the team the same, and a lot of that data is going to fall off the radar, or you get a bigger team. And maybe one more thing could happen. The business starts figuring out how to do some of these things in a vacuum, or, the load, the data engineering thing becomes more disseminated across the team. It becomes a shared, not shared resource, but more people are going to have access to that information. They're going to do their own things with the data, and it won't be centralized in the IT team all the time.
And I think the training that's not going to be done on the intricacies. What about when something does break, right? Where they're creating their own indexes, or they do their own quick fixes, and it works. But when something eventually does break, do they have the skills and that experience, though, too, where that actually does come with training on to be able to, identify, audit, and fix?
I think that's a requirement on the business user, but I would expect a DBA to already know those things, right? If I'm hiring someone who's going to be a DBA in this new cloud realm, I'm going to expect them to know how to use these technologies. I'm going to expect them to know how to find problems and solve them, troubleshoot things. It's going to be a skill set that they're going to have to prove to me that they know how to do.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting world because the tool sets are more powerful for the business user, and they're branching much harder into the traditional IT space.
Yes,
but that presents its own challenges. I wouldn't be so flippant as to say business is going to step into a realm where they would quickly drown, right? Like I don't know.
Wait, are you saying they would quickly drown, or they won't quickly drown?
They will.
Okay,
they will. Absolutely. I think either way, the relationships have changed a bit.
I want to pick apart that comment because I don't like it very much.
Go ahead. No, well, I guess it's a pushback to your, like, you have to do these things because the business is going to take over what you're doing from an infrastructure standpoint. That's essentially what I heard you say.
Okay.
Like-
I like that. Okay. So let me, I'm going to round that thought out there a little bit more, right? If Microsoft is providing tools to the business that do not require infrastructure, and the same tools are the ones that the IT group should be using to run things on a, infrastructureless system, a SaaS or a PaaS kind of thing. If the one of the major hurdles for getting information into business users' hands was the infrastructure control, what you're seeing now is Microsoft is relinquishing that away from an IT solely role. And they're now giving you a platform that is enabling a business user to do more. Now, here's my point that I want to make here is business users, and me particularly, I would probably call myself a business user now, still a little bit. I'm more IT than I ever have been before. But as a business user, I am now less reliant on another team of infrastructure experts to get done with more data and be able to accomplish what I need to accomplish. The business does not understand CI/CD pipelines. The business does not understand backups and all these other things, dev, test, prod. When I was a business guy, did not care. I just needed my answers. I needed to get stuff done. So what I feel like is happening is the tooling has changed, fundamentally changed. We say this all the time about Power BI in general. The tooling has changed so much and enabled the business to get so engaged with what they're doing in data. You're going to find if the IT group doesn't support this and help out and provide data, the business will be sneaky and will just figure out how to do it on their own. Not saying it's right. Wouldn't also say it's performant. There may also be a lot of waste going on with that. But at the end of the day, they're going to get their answer met. They're going to figure out how to make decisions to drive the business.
Businesses. So I guess I agree and I disagree, right? Like business has always found ways to do that. It was called access databases
and Excel,
right? Or Excel.
Yes, 100%.
Right? So that data has lived in its own ecosystem since Excel, right? Or Access. So
100% would agree.
From a architecture and tooling standpoint, I think your understanding of the technologies behind the new ecosystems that are available to the business are much deeper. But from a business user perspective, they don't care, and nor do they know.
No, they don't care.
I do agree, right? So from the standpoint of, I do agree holistically, if an organization isn't tied in, or their IT groups IT isn't the right word.
No.
Enterprise groups aren't tied into what is happening on the back end.
Yes.
And Microsoft isn't building those inroads on the back end.
Sure.
Then there are gaps, and we're going to consistently remain separated.
Yes.
As opposed to what we've talked a lot about, which is how do we integrate this further?
Yes.
So that we have a grow up story, or so that the enterprise solutions tie in with these new solutions. Right.
Yes.
And that's what I think is still part of the conversation and needs to be fleshed out even further in all of these different areas as the capabilities increase, which is fantastic because it just means better, bigger, more insight to the business faster. But there's a balance in here that at some point we're trying to make sure these systems work well together, and we're doing things in a way that can scale if they need to. Yeah,
I totally agree. And again, a lot of this to this point as well, like, there is this idea of like, it's almost dangerous to the traditional IT space that a business user, a manager, a director can literally show up at Azure and start their own tenant and start everything they want on a credit card. No,
you can't. Like, dude,
can you?
Your systems and tenants are locked down in organizations. You're not going to be able to just do that without perms.
Yes, you can. Anyone can go into Azure and make any tenant name they want. And if your business uses it, so my point here is the tools, like, granted,
so you're saying, yes, anybody could go do that and it wouldn't tie into their corporate organization. And if they did it, they would probably get fired.
Well,
because if they started pulling data out into its own tenant, you would basically probably be breaching every contract you've ever signed with your organization.
I'm just saying there's not that I've seen this, but well, I'm not gonna say things.
Just saying.
It happens. So like I'm saying, it happens. So and I understand, but there are needs. Again, this is where I feel like the enterprise needs to make sure that they're in tune with what's happening in the business unit level. If they're not, this is the kind of stuff that you get. And at the end of the day, if that team is running what they need to run without a lot of governance, I think again, to your point though, I agree. It opens you up to a lot of security risk. It opens you up to a lot of issues. But wow,
that's an interesting use case you have right there.
Well, I mean, how's that any different? How's that any different than a bunch of E5? I mean, so I would say I understand your point there, but how's it any different than a company rolls out E5s, the enterprise has no understanding of what Power BI is, and someone stumbles across, I downloaded desktop, and they can use desktop, and again, they may have their computers locked down, but they're using desktop now to do what they got to do, and they just publish it to my workspace, right? Mm-hmm. It's literally already there, already running, and someone at the disconnected, enterprise level doesn't understand what's happening inside the business unit. And so they're already creating a whole silo of data that's maybe not connecting to the rest of everything else in the organization. I mean, there's always it depends kind of conversation here, but I'm saying like the tooling is available that if you hire, like a business user could go hire a very smart engineer or data engineer and say, we've got to do this and light this sucker up. And with minimal blessing from the enterprise level, can do a lot on their own now. And so I'm just saying the tooling, the cloud, and the reason why, and when I was selling cloud to companies, the cloud is an advantage because it allows you to innovate much faster. But you have to have understanding of how it works to some degree, because you get yourself in a lot of expense cost if you don't monitor it closely. So I don't know. I'm not trying to throw another whole random topic in there. And I agree with you, Seth. I would not recommend a business unit leader, director, whatever, go out and just turn something on. But man, it's almost too easy. It's almost too easy at this point.
And that's okay. I really think that's okay.
See, Tommy's going to get fired. Tommy's the guy getting fired. Tommy's going to punch his credit card into Azure and start spinning up his own synapse and ripping out of Databricks and just expensing it back to the business. Don't tell.
Right?
Don't tell.
That is not a don't tell kind of thing. Like what you're outlining is a breach. It's a breach of security for a company. That's what you're outlining.
But I'm saying this is the point though. The enterprise needs to be in tune with what's going on, because if the enterprise doesn't engage, what the enterprise should be doing is, hey, Mr. Business Unit, we have a way of you billing back what you're spending. We can bill your department, and here's a secure way of engaging with you. Here's the tools that we're going to be able to put in place. We're going to enable you. And I think as soon as you have more of that kind of conversation,
let's separate this out into a way you would do it. If there's an IT arm of your organization that is controlling everything, and you're a business unit and you need, to use these tools, and then some sort of approval has to happen to engage in a tenant being created that ties into your organization.
Correct.
In some way, shape, or form.
Yes.
Like that is the appropriate way to do it. And if your organization says no, it's probably not a good idea to go whip out your personal credit card and create your own tenant. Just saying. If you like your job, it's probably not the best way to go about doing it.
I'm not saying do it. I'm just saying it is very frictionless compared to what it was before. You can't buy.
I agree.
I'm not going out and a business leader is not going to go and be like, oh, I'm going to go buy a SQL server. I'm going to go drag it in on-prem, and we're going to like hook this sucker up, and we're going to use it there. Like they're not going to do that.
I didn't see us going here from DBA.
Yeah. But anyways,
cautionary tale.
Don't stand up your own tenant. Get some buy-in first. 100% agree. Well, we've burned through a perfectly good hour of your time. I hope this conversation has been useful for you. There's some talking points here that are in this area. I guess I would say as a final wrap here is this whole area of DBA is probably in flux as we speak. The cloud is changing how this stuff works and what you need to learn and how you need to integrate with this across a business. At the end of the day, it's all about getting it together, transforming it, and making insights. So
yeah, and final thoughts. I would say engage with the owners of the systems. Like if you have them, if you're new to Databricks and you have a Databricks instance stood up and you want to utilize it, or some SQL service in the cloud or PaaS. All I'm saying, if you're doing it on your own, I would say it's worth understanding some of the fundamentals of performance, right? Digging into those.
Go get some certs from Microsoft. Agreed.
Well, certifications or not, right? Like it's just, hey, how do I make a performant database? Like put the DBA hat on, or put the hat on for performance of the systems that you're using, so that when you build them, you don't just make kind of blanket assumptions that everything's going to work well with.
I would agree
with the way you're doing it.
And I would encourage more of our business user area to self-educate in that space. Get more educated there from the business side, and that will inevitably do well for your career. Excellent. Well, with that, we just want to say thank you very much for listening. We appreciate your time. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and give us a comment on the chat thread of what we're doing here on the video episode. We'd love to have your comments and what you're thinking about this. Where do you think a DBA fits in the architecture nowadays? And if anything else, we would love to share the episode. Go out on social medias, post it somewhere, let us know what you thought about it. You can tell me how wrong I was on the internet. So no worries there. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find the podcast anywhere they are available, from Apple, Spotify, the Google Podcasts. If you are listening right now, join the conversation live every Tuesday and Thursday.
Awesome. Well, thank you all very much, and we'll see you next